Queensland, where the air never really cools and the rivers look black even at noon. The Gulf country stretches wide here, endless wetlands, salt-stained trees, and the calls of birds that vanish when the tide turns. It's a land that never surrendered to people. We just learned to move through it carefully. They say every river in this country has a personality. Some are patient, some are cruel, and a few still carry legends heavy enough to bend maps. In 1957, the town of Normanton gave birth to one of those legends, Krys, the 28-foot crocodile. But a few hundred kilometers east, along another lonely river mouth, another story began to grow. Locals called it the Wyabba monster. And if the tales are true, it was every bit as real and every bit as terrifying. If you trace a line on the map from Normanton to Staaten River, you'll pass through a region that geologists call the Gulf Lowlands, a flat, shimmering world where fresh water meets the sea in tangled green corridors. The Norman River, home of Krys, winds west. The Staaten River turns east before spilling into the Gulf near Kynuna and the Staaten River National Park. Both are part of the same tidal heart. When the moon pulls the sea inland, both rivers rise and breathe together. And when you look at it that way, it makes sense that both would spawn stories of giants, as if the rivers themselves were siblings in an ancient myth cycle. From Norman to Staaten, they call it the Northern Crocodile Legend Belt, where the tide carries both memory and monsters. The earliest mentions of the Wyabba monster date back to the 1970s and 80s, passed by fishermen, stockmen, and government rangers who worked the backwaters. They told of a massive crocodile that haunted the upper bends of the Staaten River, a creature so large it left a wave when it slid from the bank, and so quiet it vanished before anyone could raise a rifle. One stockman swore he'd seen it take a cow, a full-grown animal, and disappear without a sound. Another claimed his aluminum dinghy was lifted by something beneath the surface, as though the river itself had come alive. When locals joked, they said, if Krys was the Queen of Normanton, Wyabba was her brother, and he didn't like visitors. But there were never photos, never proof, only ripples, and the memory of something moving just below the reflection of the moon. The crocodile hunting days of northern Queensland were wild. After crocodile protection laws came in the 1970s, many hunters turned poachers or guides. They lived rough, sleeping in half-collapsed huts, selling skins, chasing stories. In that world, a legend like the Wyabba monster was currency. It drew men upriver, armed with old .303s and floodlights, dreaming of a kill that would make them famous. Some said they found tracks wider than car tires. Others claimed to have followed drag marks for 30 meters into the mud. One hunter in 1986 told a Cairns paper he'd seen a croc longer than the boat, and we were in a 20-foot tinny. Of course, some of those men were drunk. Most were half mad from mosquitoes, and nearly all were chasing ghosts. But in their rough notebooks and stories told around rum-fueled fires, the Wyabba monster kept getting bigger. If you ask me, stories like this don't survive just because people are bored. They survive because they fill a gap science hasn't walked into yet. I've stood by rivers like these, where the water looks still but moves like muscle beneath the surface. you feel small. And that's the truth most people don't admit. The further north you go, the more you realize you're not on top of the food chain. Maybe the Wyabba monster was just an exaggeration. Maybe it was a mix of several large crocs, seen years apart, combined into one impossible beast. But if you spend enough nights in that heat, hearing the splash of something heavy in black water, you start to understand why people believe. In the tropics, legends don't die. They just hide until the next tide. Science tells us that saltwater crocodiles, Crocodilus porosus, can reach around 6 meters, or about 20 feet, with exceptionally large males approaching 7 meters, roughly 23 feet. Theoretically, with enough food, isolation, and time, they could grow even larger, perhaps even beyond what science has yet confirmed. The Staaten River provides all three. Its channels stretch for hundreds of kilometers, many left untouched for decades. Buffalo and wild pigs roam the floodplains, meaning food is never scarce, and the water stays warm year-round, the perfect incubator for size and patience. There's no reason a crocodile couldn't reach truly abnormal proportions here. Biologists simply haven't had the chance or the courage to verify it. If there's anywhere left on Earth where a 30-foot croc could still move unseen, it's the rivers of far north Queensland. There's a story I keep coming back to. In 1992, a wildlife ranger camping near Wyabba Bend woke to the sound of something huge shifting in the shallows. He said it was like thunder rolling underwater. He grabbed his torch, swept it across the river. Nothing, but the surface was still trembling. When he packed up at dawn, he noticed deep slide marks leading into the water, fresh and wide. He never returned to that post. He told one friend years later, whatever it was, it knew I was there first. Some call that story a fabrication. Others say that ranger still refuses to talk about the Staaten, but the river hasn't stopped moving since. Just a few years after that ranger's story, another case rippled through the same region. February 1986, the wet season in full force. A young woman named Catherine Ann Macquarie vanished while wading near a bend of the Staaten River. Locals said she'd been collecting driftwood with friends when the water erupted, once violently, and then went still. Authorities called it a tragic accident, a likely crocodile attack. But no one ever found the animal or the remains. Only a torn section of fabric washed up days later, miles downstream. Then, months later that same year, hunters claimed they'd harpooned a massive saltwater crocodile not far from the site. Its length was never officially recorded, at least not in the reports that survived. But they swore it matched the old tales. Deep scars across the snout, and a girth as wide as a car hood. The newspapers ran it as suspected killer crocodile trapped, and for a while people stopped swimming in the Staaten. But in the Gulf country, stories don't fade that easily. Some said it was just another big croc doing what crocs do. Others whispered it was the same creature, the Wyabba monster finally caught, then quietly buried under the tides. No proof, no photos, just the silence that comes after something enormous leaves the water. So, what do you believe? Was the Wyabba monster just another fisherman's brag? A myth born from heat, beer, and boredom? Or could another giant, like Krys, still slide beneath those mangrove roots, old, scarred, and patient? Maybe the truth hides somewhere between the waves and the whispers. These rivers don't give up secrets easily, and sometimes they only show you what you're ready to see. Tell me in the comments, would you camp beside the Staaten after dark? Because here, Legends don't just haunt stories, they watch from the waterline. From Normanton to Staaten, two rivers share one heartbeat, a pulse made of tide and thunder. The locals still talk about the giants of the Gulf country as if they were family members, half remembered, half feared, never entirely gone. Maybe the Wyabba monster was never caught because it was never meant to be. Or maybe it was real once, and time, like the tide, simply took it back. In the end, proof fades, but wonder doesn't. And in Queensland's rivers, wonder still waits below the surface. Because the Wyabba monster was never just a story about a crocodile. It's about the line between what we know and what we fear still hides below. From the dark corners of the earth to the stories that still move beneath its surface. This has been Backtales Stories. I'd be grateful if you left a comment. It helps keep the legends alive. Stay curious and stay safe.